Oil just spiked 7% in a single session. That doesn't happen without a reason. And the reason this time isn't a hurricane, isn't a pipeline failure, isn't a supply glitch. It's a direct warning from the President of the United States, aimed at Iran. Trump issued a stark ultimatum. If Iran doesn't reach a nuclear deal, military action is on the table. Not as a vague diplomatic threat, as a stated option. Markets heard it. Traders reacted within hours. Brent crude crossed levels it hasn't touched in months, and it didn't stop there. Here's what you need to understand. Oil doesn't spike 7% because of words alone. It spikes when markets believe those words could become action. Right now they do. This just changed the entire calculus of the Middle East energy equation, and your cost of living is already in the crossfire. What happens next is the real story. To understand why this moment is different, you need to see the pattern, because this didn't come out of nowhere. For over 2 decades, the US and Iran have been locked in a slow-motion standoff over one thing: nuclear capability. Every administration drew lines. Most of those lines got crossed with no real consequence. But the timeline shifted dramatically in Trump's first term. The US pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal in 2018. Sanctions crushed Iran's oil exports. Tehran responded by accelerating uranium enrichment, past the point most analysts considered safe. Fast forward to today. Iran is closer to weapons-grade enrichment than at any point in modern history. Intelligence assessments aren't vague anymore, they're specific. And Trump, back in power, is not operating with diplomatic patience this time. He's already reimposed maximum pressure sanctions. He's repositioned naval assets in the region. And now, the warning is public and direct. Most people are missing this. The escalation ladder has already been climbing for months. The 7% spike isn't the beginning, it's the market finally catching up. But this is where it gets serious. Here's exactly what happened, and why the sequence matters. Trump sent a direct letter to Iran's Supreme Leader Khamenei. The message was unambiguous. Negotiate now, or face military consequences. Not through back channels, not through intermediaries. A letter, documented, deliberate. Iran's response was measured but firm. They didn't reject talks outright, but they rejected the framing. Tehran's position: they won't negotiate under military threat. That's not diplomacy, they said. That's coercion. On the surface, it looks like two sides talking past each other, standard geopolitical theater. But this is where the story changes. Within 48 hours of Trump's warning, U.S. military strikes hit Houthi positions in Yemen, Iran's most active regional proxy. That's not coincidence. That's a message delivered in 2 languages simultaneously. Words to Tehran, missiles to their allies. Right now, this signals a strategy of layered pressure. Diplomatic ultimatum on one track, military action on another, both running at the same time. Iran is being squeezed from multiple directions at once, and the window for a negotiated exit is narrowing fast. The uncertainty isn't whether pressure is being applied, it's whether Iran bends or breaks in the wrong direction. Here's why the entire global economy is watching this, not just the Middle East. Iran sits on the Strait of Hormuz. That single choke point controls approximately 20% of the world's oil supply. Every day, roughly 17 million barrels pass through that narrow corridor. Saudi oil, UAE oil, Iraqi oil, Kuwaiti oil. All of it moves through waters Iran can threaten or block. This is not a regional conflict. This is infrastructure risk at planetary scale. And the structural shift happening right now goes beyond oil. What changed this week is the credibility calculation. Markets spent years discounting U.S. threats toward Iran as political noise. That discount is being repriced in real time. What this means for you is direct. When Hormuz gets factored into risk models, energy prices don't just spike once. They reprice at a higher baseline and stay there. But there's a second layer most analysts are underweighting. China imports over 40% of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz. A disruption doesn't just hit American gas prices, it hits Chinese manufacturing costs, which hits global supply chains, which circles back to inflation in every major economy simultaneously. Trump understands this leverage. That's not an accident, it's the strategy. One strait, one warning, global consequences. Pull back from the headlines and a clear strategic architecture emerges. Trump's approach isn't impulsive, it's calculated pressure sequencing. The public letter to Khamenei wasn't diplomacy, it was positioning. It forces Iran to respond on the record, in public, which eliminates their ability to quietly negotiate while maintaining hardline domestic rhetoric. Tehran is now boxed in politically before talks even begin. The simultaneous Houthi strikes follow the same logic. They degrade Iran's forward deterrence capability, while signaling that U.S. restraint has a hard expiration date. Every proxy asset Iran loses weakens its negotiating leverage without triggering a direct confrontation, yet. Here's what the strategic thinking actually looks like inside this decision. Maximum pressure worked partially in Trump's first term. It crippled Iran's economy but didn't kill the nuclear program. This time, the pressure is being applied faster, harder, and with military punctuation. The calculation is this: Iran has three options: negotiate from a weakening position, retaliate and risk full escalation, or stall and absorb the damage while enrichment continues. Most people are missing this. Stalling is actually Iran's most dangerous option for global markets, because every month of stalling brings them closer to a threshold that makes military intervention almost inevitable, and markets know it. Right now, oil traders aren't pricing in war. They're pricing in the probability of war. That probability just moved. But the other side tells a different story. There's a serious counter-argument, and ignoring it would be analytical laziness. Iran's position, stripped of propaganda, has internal logic. They've watched Libya disarm and collapse. They watched Iraq get invaded on false intelligence. From Tehran's perspective, nuclear capability isn't aggression, it's the only deterrent that actually works. The argument inside Iran isn't whether to enrich, it's whether survival requires going all the way. And on the US side, critics aren't just coming from the left. Seasoned foreign policy realists are raising a different concern. Maximum pressure has a track record, and it's mixed. It didn't stop North Korea, it didn't stop Pakistan. Economic pain doesn't automatically produce political capitulation. Sometimes it produces entrenchment. There's also a miscalculation risk that markets are underpricing. Trump's team may believe Iran will fold under pressure. Iran's leadership may believe Trump won't actually strike during an economically sensitive period. Both sides could be wrong simultaneously, and that's when accidents happen. The diplomatic angle isn't dead either. Back-channel communications between US and Iranian officials have been reported in Oman. Quiet talks exist beneath the public confrontation. That's either a genuine off-ramp or a stalling mechanism Tehran is using to buy enrichment time. The honest answer: nobody outside 3 rooms in Washington and Tehran knows which one it is. Let's make this concrete, because this isn't abstract geopolitics, this is already hitting your wallet. Gas prices in the US were showing early signs of stabilization heading into spring. That trajectory just reversed. A sustained 7% oil spike translates to roughly 20 to 25 cents per gallon at the pump within 2 to 3 weeks. That's the historical conversion rate. It's mechanical, not speculative. But fuel is just the visible layer. Every product that gets manufactured, packaged, and shipped runs on energy costs. When oil reprices upward and stays there, transportation costs rise, freight rates climb. Manufacturers absorb what they can, then pass the rest to consumers. That pass-through shows up in grocery bills, household goods, and construction materials within 60 to 90 days. Inflation was already proving stickier than the Federal Reserve wanted, and sustained energy shock now complicates every rate decision they face through the rest of 2025. Lower rates become harder to justify when energy is pushing prices up from below. For global markets, the risk is asymmetric. A diplomatic resolution produces a brief relief rally, oil drops, markets stabilize. But a military escalation scenario produces a supply shock with no quick fix. Hormuz disruption isn't a problem you solve in weeks, it's a crisis that runs for months. Emerging markets with dollar-denominated energy imports get hit hardest and fastest. Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, economies already under pressure face immediate currency stress. What this means for you is simple. The outcome of a negotiation happening in back channels right now directly determines what you pay for groceries, gas, and goods before summer. So where does this actually go, and what's the realistic timeline? Short term, the next 30 days are the highest risk window. Iran will respond to Trump's letter formally, and the language they choose will signal everything. Conditional openness to talks means the back channel in Oman has traction. Outright rejection means the escalation ladder just lost another rung. Watch the Strait of Hormuz shipping data. If Iranian naval activity increases near the choke point, oil doesn't spike another 7%, it spikes 15%. That's not prediction, that's market mechanics responding to physical risk. Midterm, 3 scenarios are in play. First, negotiated pause. Iran agrees to limited enrichment caps in exchange for partial sanctions relief. Oil pulls back, markets stabilize. This is the optimistic path, and right now, it's the least probable. Second, frozen escalation. Both sides apply pressure without crossing into direct conflict. Oil stays elevated between $90 and $100 per barrel. Inflation gets a second wind globally. This is the most likely scenario for the next 90 days. Third, miscalculation. One strike, one incident, one proxy attack that goes too far, and the entire framework collapses into direct confrontation. Oil breaches $120. Global recession risk reprices overnight. Here's the cold reality. The world is not heading toward resolution. It's heading toward a decision point, and that decision will be made under pressure, with incomplete information, by people with conflicting incentives. The 7% spike wasn't the shock, it was the warning. The real move hasn't happened yet.